Welcome to Empower Hour, your go-to podcast for all things disability and independence, brought to you by Empower Abilities, your disability and aging experts. I'm co-host Afton Harper.
And I'm Julie Jordan. Listen in as we dive into real stories, resources, and meaningful conversations that empower individuals with disabilities to live life to the fullest.
Whether you're tuning in for advocacy, inspiration, or practical tips, you're in the right place.
This is Empower Hour, because independence isn't a destination, it's a journey.
I want to take a minute to tell you about some of the services we offer here at Empower Abilities. We're all about helping people with disabilities live as independently as they want. That could mean helping someone find housing, navigate Medicare, get connected with benefits, or learn skills for daily living. We offer individual case management, advocacy, peer support, and information and referral. Basically, we help people find what they need and figure out how to get it. We also have home modifications, like ramps, grab bars, or walker steps, plus assistive technology, recycled medical equipment, and if you need a hearing aid, we can help with that too. Everything from evaluations to repairs. And for those who need a little extra help at home, we offer consumer-directed services and veterans-directed care, things like transportation and meal prep, housekeeping and personal care. But it's not all services and paperwork. We also host social clubs, support groups, and community events so people can connect, have fun, and build relationships. Because independence doesn't mean isolation. So if any of that sounds like something you or someone you care about might be interested in, give us a call or check out our website at empowerabilities.org. We're here to help, and we love what we do.
Well, hello there. I'm Julie Jordan, and we are with Afton Harper and Shane Schoeller, the Greene County Clerk. Today, we're going to be talking about all things voting here on Empower Hour. Shane, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Julie. Great to be here with you in Afton.
Good deal. So we're going to be talking all things voting today, but give us a little intro to yourself. What does the Greene County Clerk do? And give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, the role of the county clerk is really very administrative in terms of the responsibilities we have. So a lot of people think about us in terms of election administration when they go to vote. Of course, coordinate with that, you have voter registration. In terms of people registering to vote, make sure that we have our voter registered prior to the election. So those two kind of go hand in hand. We also do tax administration. And so we work between the assessor and the collector, serve as secretary to the Board of Equalization. So if a property owner says, I don't think the assessor got my property value right, they can appeal, have a hearing before the Board of Equalization. Of course, we keep all those records, notice up the meetings and everything. And so we serve as secretary of that board. And then we actually work with all the political subdivisions. And so as they're getting ready to set their tax levies, we're working with them. Then once all the tax levies are set for each political subdivision, so think of your schools, your fire protection districts, your cities, your water entities, and then the county itself, then we'll take all of the final values for your real estate personal property and then take the tax levy, and then we send all that information to the collector. And then, of course, that's when we get that wonderful statement sometime around November of the year.
That's when you're really popular, right?
That's right. Well, that's the collector, so he gets to send out that statement. And then we also oversee licensing for all anyone who serves liquor here in the county of Greene. I like to joke I'm a teetotal Baptist with my name in every liquor establishment in the county. And then auctioneer licenses, actually, we do that. And then notary. So if you obtain a notary, we're the end point of that notary certification process. So you will come in, obtain your notary, and then take your oath with our office. And then once you complete that work, show your bond, then you're an official notary. And then another thing that a lot of people don't think about is that we actually do all the payroll and retirement benefits for the county itself. And so I say for people that know us from the public side, they think about elections. But if you work for the county, they want to make sure every other week they're getting that paycheck.
Right.
So we do that. And then finally, record retention and archiving of all permanent records for the county. And this goes all the way back to 1831 when the county was formed. And so we have a really incredible resource in terms of just the records of our county that go back to the 1830s, when county of Greene was much bigger than it is today. And so slowly other counties built around us, but we used to go all the way almost up to St. Louis and almost all the way up to a quarter of where Missouri is in terms of southwest part.
That's a lot. That's a lot more encompassing than I even
Yes.
dreamed of.
Yeah, that's why it's very administrative in nature in terms of what we do and how we serve the public.
And you've been on this job for how long?
This is my 11th year.
Okay.
What does the day-to-day look like for you?
Well, I mean, other than, volume in terms of, a lot of people think about election years, for example, tax administration. That's, the process that's happening every year throughout the year. There are different parts of that happen in different parts of the year. Of course, when you think about payroll and retirement, we're overseeing that. That's every other week. Elections, of course, we have a number of elections during even numbered years, during general election years, but even in the odd years, after the April elections, entities have the option to have an August or a November election. And sometimes an entity can decide to have a bonding election in February. And so that option's there. So we just have a lot of things. Of course, people are all the time obtaining, liquor license not only for their establishment, but if they're catering. So we're, and then notary licensing takes place throughout the year. People are getting their notaries renewed or for the first time. And as you can imagine, for the county the size of Greene, record retention not only for our office and the commission, but all the you think about the sheriff's office, you think about the courts, all of those things. It's a full-time job just to make sure that we're not only doing the job, but, especially in tax administration and some of those other duties, there's deadlines throughout the year that you have to meet that are statutory. And so you have to stay on top of all those.
Is there one important thing that all Greene County residents should know about your office that maybe they don't?
Well, I think, you're like, well, gee, guys talking a lot about administration. But I think, one, everyone thinks about us when it comes to elections. That's an important duty. Yeah, I really enjoy doing that. But, when you think about, your government and the services that, we provide to the public in terms of what our statutory and constitutional duties are, I think it's really important that, people understand that, for example, in the tax administration process, one, we're there for accountability. You've got three entities working together, the assessor, county clerk, and the collector. But if that's not done properly, then suddenly your schools don't get the funding they need, for example. Fire protection districts don't get the funds they need. All those things are critical to make sure that all the entities that you rely on as a taxpayer are done correctly. And so I think that's one thing that, when you think about it, well, that sounds pretty boring, but at the end of the day, if we don't do it and do it well, it can become a problem. And occasionally you'll see these things in the newspaper headlines, and that's not to throw criticism at anyone in that gets in that position. It's just to show how important it is when it is not performed well, if that makes sense.
Accountability.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So we have some important elections coming up next month. Let's talk a little bit about elections, Afton.
What elections are coming up here in 2025 and 2026?
Well, I appreciate that. It feels like we're still in 2026. Anyway, well, the city of Springfield has an issue on the ballot. It's a tax issue this November the 4th, and so voters are already currently voting absentee on that, and here in a couple of weeks they'll be able to vote no excuse absentee. And then, of course, polls will be open for residents inside the city limits of Springfield from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then the following elections, this next April election, we know will be the 7th of April, general municipal election. And then next year is the statewide primary election on the 4th of August. And then finally, after the statewide primary, we'll head into the November 3rd election. So those are the ones that we know we have. February is optional, I mentioned the bonding election. And occasionally, you could have a runoff election. For example, that's happened before in terms of like just a couple of years ago. In the city of Willard, we had two candidates for mayor that tied. And so those are the ones that we know of. And occasionally, you'll get another election that will be part of the year. And those are the ones that you wait for and find out on election night usually.
Yeah. And so when should voters start paying attention to registration?
All voters, if they're not registered in the county, have to be registered no less than 4 weeks prior to the date of the election. But if you're already a registered voter here in Greene County, or let's say that you're in Christian County and moved to Greene County, or if you're listening to this and you moved from Greene to Christian, the good news is that even on the day of the election, whether you live in the county registered or move to another county as a registered voter in Missouri, you can change your registration on election day. Now, do we recommend that? No. And here's why, is if you go to your polling location, it's at the end of the day, and you haven't changed your registration, it can be difficult to get to either your assigned polling location or a central polling location where anybody who's an eligible voter can vote during the day of the election. But if you are from another county, you actually have to come to our office because we have to check to make sure you haven't voted in the other county before you vote here. So there's some things we have to do. So we always recommend do it prior, not the day of, and that will make sure that things go better for you as a voter during the day of the election.
We're all big procrastinators, though. That's
well, and that's why we're there. But even this last November, you would be amazed at how many. We had a line pretty much outside the courthouse of people that had moved from another county, and we're very glad to do that because otherwise they wouldn't get a chance to have their voice heard because people don't think about doing that. But as much as we could communicate, hey, if you can do it now versus later, they'll have a lot better experience.
How does your office ensure transparency and accurate counting of votes?
Well, we are constantly working in terms of making sure we follow all the statutory laws. I think those are incredibly important in terms of, it's a bipartisan process, but we also, during that 10-week period, we're following the laws that are within our state statutes in terms of how that election is administered. And so a part of that is, for example, we do public testing of all of the ballots that are going to be cast on the day of the election. We'll test the equipment. We'll test the ballots to make sure that the machines are accurately reading them. And then after the election, we're going to do the same thing. Bipartisan teams participate that before and after. And then we actually do a hand count after the election. So on election night, we'll have a bipartisan team randomly draw no less than 5 precincts for the county if it's a countywide election. And then we'll go through like in a presidential election, and our counting teams, bipartisan, will draw from a presidential statewide race. So it could be president or governor, for example. They'll do a legislative race, so that could be for Congress or it could be for the General Assembly, like for the state house or state senate. Then they'll do one for an issue that's on the ballot, the statewide issue. Then they'll also do one for the county itself in terms of an office holder for the county, and it could potentially be an issue. And then also we will do one for the courts. So it could be your local circuit court, could be the appellate court, could be the Supreme Court. All of that is opened up to the eyes of the public so they can come in and participate. And we really invite that because, it's important that when we administer elections that people are part of that process, get to see, observe, and participate. And then, when questions are asked, we have a lot better confidence in terms of people have been here, they've watched it, and if there is a question, it's been done in the light of day. And that's what you want in terms of the confidence of the public.
So are there any changes or improvements planned for the next election cycle?
I think that when we look at, changes and improvements, one of the things that we're looking at is we would really like to, for example, our website, because I know we're talking about accessibility, longer term. I want to make sure that our website is there's a current federal standard that's, as you probably know, being applied to all websites in terms of public websites. But I know there are other features that are even more helpful than what the federal standards apply. So we're working to make sure that, we can eventually not only meet the federal standard, but go above and beyond that for people, for example, that have visual impairment when they go to our website. Because one of my future goals with the website would be to make sure that when people go on the website and actually click the ballot, that rather than just relying on their reader like through Word, that we actually have an audible ballot that can be read that has the names of the candidates that could be correctly read for them as they're reviewing their sample ballot before they go vote.
Yeah, I know those sample ballots are really important for people to feel prepared before the election, and having an accessible version, I'm sure, is much appreciated.
Absolutely, yeah, it's critical.
Afton's kind of our tester here for things that are inclusive to all as far as
Yes.
website and social media and things like that. We can run it past her, and she's up on all the latest standards and everything. So
That's exactly right.
she's a
Yes.
good one to have in your pocket. So let's talk about all things accessibility and inclusion. Empowerabilities, we're here to remove barriers and so that all people feel like they can participate fully in their community and the
Yes.
activities. So, what other accessibility options are available for people at the polling locations?
Well, the first thing is, and we were the first county in the state to do this at the time, is we had more than one central polling location. So every county, normally it's going to be the courthouse, that's the central polling location for voters. And what that means is that you're having a assigned polling location, but for example, if you have challenges just getting access into your polling location, the central polling location is where you can vote, where it meets all ADA standards in terms of accessibility. We have not only our courthouse now, but at both hospitals, both Mercy and Cox on their main campuses, we have our central polling location. Missouri State University, normally at their Welcome Center. The bigger elections will be in the arena, the basketball arena. And then we also at the City Utilities Bus Transit Center. That's another option voters have. And so that really, I think, makes a big difference. For example, not everyone has transportation, but they reside inside the city. I know sometimes that the time on the bus is not necessarily enjoyable, but we're at least providing an option where they can get to that transit center and be able to cast their ballot if they can't get any other type of ride that day during the day of the election. So that's something that we've been doing since 2018, have expanded on it. The first place we did it was MSU, and then we started expanding thereafter. And then we also have sample Braille ballots. And so we have really been excited to have that for voters when they come to the polling location. So if they want to be able to read their ballot in Braille, if that's an option that they like, because I know in terms of visual impairment community, different people have different things that they like, and that's some of them want that Braille, and so we've got that Braille there available for them. And then, of course, when they use the accessible voting equipment, it has what I call kind of a paddle that has Braille on it, and you could work through your entire ballot, hear it audibly, and be able to vote your ballot through that. It also has a sip and puff. So, for example, if you're not able to use your hands to be able to vote, you can, as you well know, for folks who have that, they've got the equipment that they can plug in the machine and be able, through their breath, be able to vote their ballot and work through that ballot that way. And then, of course, it's has a screen that can be increased in font size as well. So there's a lot of options there that we use to make sure that when voters come, they've got the best opportunity to be able to vote independently, which I think we all want to do as voters.
Yeah, those central polling locations are really important. I know those are the places that I've voted the most.
Good.
I know even when I was a student at MSU, that's where I would go to vote, is at that Welcome Center or at the arena.
Okay, excellent. Yeah.
And so if someone with a disability shows up to vote at some of these polling locations, what can they expect? Are staff trained to help them?
Great question. So one of the things I observed early on when I became county clerk, when we had a different version of accessible voting equipment that was called a DRE, direct recording electronic, whereas now the product we use it actually prints out the ballot. And so I think that's something that people really appreciate in terms of they get a ballot they can cast. The previous version, a DRE, direct recording electronic, you would never get to physically be able to touch that ballot. It record, you would see it roll up on a slip, kind of like you see at a gas station, and then it would scroll it, and you could hear your ballot, but that was all you could see as a voter and be aware of. So now we have the ballot marking device, and so it's as opposed to the DRE. And one of the things I observed was occasionally we'd have someone who, when we were in the training, would not set up their equipment when they got to the polling location, and we would hear, well, no one uses this. And that was kind of the justification. We were because of the training and the expertise necessary, they were being paid additional funds to be able to do that job that day. But we also found our training was not adequate. And so what we did was we improved our training, but then also expect everyone who's going to do be what we call the express vote operator for that day, because that's the name of the equipment for the company we work with, ES&S. They actually have to come in and pass a test. And so showing us that they have the competence to be able to walk a voter to the express vote, be able to help the voter, be able to pull up their ballot. If the voter has questions in terms of the operation of the equipment, they can help the voter, and then they walk away to allow the voter to vote privately with the ballot without that person there. But that was really important to me, and I think we've seen, and I've heard anecdotally from folks that they've seen improvements in terms of that. Not always perfect still, and when that happens, I say, hey, call us, let us know, because if we don't know, we can't address it. So if you ever have a challenge, let us know, because that's not our goal. But, we have, during the regular election day, like countywide election, 84 polling locations. And so, as you can imagine, occasionally some folks are better than others. And so if we find that out, we can either make sure they've got the training they need in the future to be helpful. And if not, then we just would not have them continue to serve in that role.
Sounds like you have to move forward based on feedback that you are receiving. So to make
Yes.
improvements and advances, you really have to have those polling location feedbacks and consumer feedback.
Well, one of the things is the Missouri Federation for the Blind put out some really good videos that you probably both have seen. I'm sure you've seen Afton in terms of just, and their focus on voting only. And one of the ladies that's here locally tells a story of, when they went to vote, their dad was there, and that they knew they were going to vote differently than their father, and that was uncomfortable for them. And I try to do that because, unfortunately, I've seen this. People sometimes don't look into the eyes of the other person and understand why it's important for that person to be able to have that right to vote independently. And I think when they hear a story, it becomes that much more powerful as to, we do need to give that person that option, because, it's a great video, because she's like, my dad supported me. There were no issues, but it was still uncomfortable because they didn't want to disappoint their parent.
Right.
And those are things that if you're not in those shoes, you don't think about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the type of tools we've used to help, give people the why of why we have this equipment and why it's important.
Absolutely. And independence means different things for everyone. So
yes.
Being able to provide those options is really important. Are there any changes upcoming with that equipment, or is it going to be the same for the next year?
Well, in terms of the company we work with does have a newer version of both our tabulation equipment and the ballot marking device. But as you can imagine, it's not inexpensive to get. So, we're certainly considering, potentially how we would purchase that equipment in the future, but it would most likely be in phases if we did versus one huge lump sum at the time. But we're always looking at ways we can improve, and we're looking at other companies. When we go to, for example, our election conference, different vendors show up with their voting equipment, and so it's always a great chance to get to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and is it better than the company we work with now? And so that's something that we're always trying to keep an eye on. And I don't know if you're all aware of this, but when we went to choose our equipment back in 2018, one of the things that I worked with Shelby on here, Shelby Butler with Empowerabilities, was I wanted to have a broad cross-section of the county of Greene. So people that were election judges, people that were younger, people that were more senior, as well as people that, represented the disability community well. And so Shelby helped me be able to make sure we had individuals who represented the community. And then we came together, all the vendors. We only had 3 companies that we could choose from then in terms of what our state allowed. But they got to see them, they got to experience them, they got to vote on them, and then they got to basically use a survey to rank them. And that was so helpful in making the choice that we did as a county. And the current company we use scored the highest when it came to accessible voting equipment.
Yeah, who better to test drive the equipment than the people that are using it?
100%.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about civic engagement. Are you seeing any trends right now with voting and people, actually getting out and
I think the one thing that it's hard probably to notice any like just trends other than when we changed to no excuse voting just the last couple of years in 2022 that was passed, and so voters were aware of it, but we really saw that trend have a huge impact in terms of voters voting before the day of the election, that 2 weeks prior, which they can now, which I mentioned earlier. But last November, we had the election center as one of our no excuse, which we always have that as an absentee location. Of course, at the historic courthouse, they can vote. But we also partnered with the library. They've been tremendous friends in terms of polling locations in general. But they also help host the no excuse voting site as well, which is one addition that we have there at the courthouse. That makes such a big difference for voters. And I've talked to election officials across the state, no one expected the response that we got in terms of just how many voters. I mean, remember the first day we opened the doors, we weren't keeping up. We added more people the next days, we weren't keeping up. We streamlined things, we made efficiencies. We could not keep up. And that's a good problem, but it's also a frustration to some voters. Some voters love it. Other voters get really angry when they have to wait. And so what we're looking at doing is, in the future, can we partner with some of our area cities to be able to have a, no excuse polling location there during the 2 weeks or 1 week prior to the election, depending upon the election. And that way it takes some of the pressure, would be the hope, off of what we saw. Because at the library center, the most visible memory I have is the Saturday before the Tuesday election. That morning, they had the line going all the way out, and they have a little court guard that's on the
I was
south
in that
side.
line, thank
You
you.
were in that line?
Yes.
Went all the way there, then wrapped all the way back around the library and went up into Academy Sports. And those are things you have to go through them to learn and be able to improve in the future. And so I share the frustration of the voters, but I hope they'll give us patience in knowing that you can't plan for that in terms of that type of response. Right. But we're going to learn from it and be better in the future.
I think that probably brings more voters out, too, during the season when you have other options than having to stand in line the day of.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add real quick, and I know you're following up after, so I apologize, but the best part about that is it makes Election Day better for voters. Because now the lines on Election Day are not so compressed.
Right.
So that's why we like that relief valve in terms of, because on Election Day, you've got 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., and, of course, that is the day of the election, and we want to always honor Election Day. That's important. But if we can find a way to be able to make that a better experience, because in years past, I know this has happened, people that can't stand for a long time will turn around and go home. So we want to really limit that as much as we can so that everyone gets a chance to be able to let their voice be heard. And this is where we see no excuse absentee voting making a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you see any patterns in turnout by age or group of people?
Other than what I hear nationally, like I understand nationally in 24, there were more youth that had voted in the past. One of the challenges we have with our voter registration software, which is the statewide voter registration software program through the Secretary of State's office, is it is a program that goes back to the early, mid-2000s, give or take. It is very hard to extract data from that. And so we have information in there, but being able to actually extract the information out, it's not designed for that, and it's hard to explain. But we're in the process. Secretary of State's office is looking at new voter registration software programs, and that's one of the things that we're seeing with the versions we have now from some of the other companies, is that they're offering the opportunity to be able to, do charts and graphs and data that gives you more information about voting trends. And so that's something, ever since I've been the clerk here in Greene County, I've really wanted to get that information, but it's really hard because we just don't have access to that right now in terms of, we have information in there, but you can't really pull it out.
Right. That makes sense.
So what can Empower Abilities do, and other organizations like us, to help boost voter participation?
The big thing I mentioned earlier, making sure anyone who's not registered to register. Of course, now you can go on your Social apps, usually before elections, they're telling you, hey, voter registration deadline. Google does that usually on their front pages. But not everybody uses those. And so the more we can remind them, hey, have you registered? Or have you changed your registration? All those things actually do increase voter participation. And then I think making sure the voters are aware of the election dates, especially local April elections. It's hard during a presidential year and a general election not to know that election's happening, right? Turn on the TV, turn on the radio, drive down the street. There's signs everywhere. There's people knocking on your door. April elections, I can just tell you, a lot of people don't have that in their calendars. And even though we're working with local media to get that out in terms of information, if they're not watching the news. And so the more you can just remind people, this is the day of the election. You can vote before the election now, 2 weeks without having to give a reason. We've got that option. Empowering people that information to make sure that they do get out and cast that ballot is really helpful, because we don't have a budget to really advertise the election. And I don't see that happen anytime in the near future either. So we appreciate partners like Empower Abilities and others who help us get that information out.
So what advice would you give someone voting for the first time or coming back after a few years?
When I meet with students in our schools, I always ask them, have you ever been left out of a conversation? And it's a pretty hurtful thing, right? When someone leaves you out of a conversation, I'm like, our elections, there are laws that protect you to make sure you are part of the conversation. So it doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your creed, doesn't matter, your economic status. None of that matters as long as you meet, that you're a citizen of this country, that you're 18 years or older, you're a resident of that county. All those things, as long as you meet them, you get the right to vote. It's like your voice is important in that conversation. It doesn't matter whether I agree with you or not. It's a matter that you know that you're going to have a chance to be able not only vote for these candidates, but there are important issues on the ballot that can have, consequences many years to follow, that without your voice, it can literally, as we know, change the outcome of an election. And so that's the thing I always try to encourage people is be part of that conversation. We need your voice. I mean, I was in the legislature for 6 years, and I told people I didn't know what they knew. If they didn't tell me, I had a chance of maybe making a wrong decision on an issue, right? And that's where voters come together, and everyone has their own, information and knowledge that's powerful that they can add into that conversation. So never underestimate the power of your voice.
I'm going to tell you a little funny story. Back when I was age eligible to vote, I was going for the first time. And, it's kind of scary if you've never done it before. You don't know what to expect or anything. And so I was talking to my dad about it. And he said, well, just go read your instructions. It'll tell you all about it and how to do it. And if you need help, just ask. Well, I get up there. I'm real confident in voting and read the directions. And I will have to say directions have come a long way since I've first voted. But I read them, and it says, mark the box opposite your choice. So I'm I literally marked the box opposite my choice. No. I was voting straight down one way. And okay, I said, mark your box. I sat here and I pondered it. But that's what it says. Mark the box opposite your choice. So I did. I marked all the opposites of what I wanted to vote. And I get home and my dad asks, of course, how it goes. And I told him exactly what I did. And I, to this day, have not lived that down. And often you say, people returning to the polls after your first experience. And I was quite hesitant for a few years to go back because of that. But, asking the questions and, if you're the first time voter, take someone with you if you have to.
Well, and here's the thing. Nobody knows that, right?
Now they do.
Back then, right? Exactly. But when you walk into a polling location, I think some people, and we all do this to some degree, we think people know more about us than they really do. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're a voter, you're in line. You're just as important as anybody else in that room. And so never let yourself, never put yourself in that frame of, I don't know enough, because every issue, it takes time, even as a county clerk, I still have to go study issues before I vote. There are certain things I want to make sure that even though I'm reading the ballot language, what's in the full legislative language that I'm voting on. And there are groups and things that you can get information on that's critical and important. Of course, we're not going to tell you how to vote. We'll provide you the sample ballot information. But at the end of the day, like you said, you can talk to people you know, ask questions, and that can really help inform you before you go vote. And if you have a bad experience, no one's going to remember that the next time. So just remember that. So, but I appreciate that story. That's good to know because I hadn't thought about
I'm
that.
sure
but
I'm not the only person that has ever done that.
Not. Yeah.
But like I say, voting has come a long way, and
Absolutely.
instructions are much more clear. And every time I go now, I read that and I just chuckle at myself for
that's awesome.
How I interpreted
Yeah. But you were sincere, and I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
So let's look ahead a little bit, Afton.
Yeah, so what can people do now to get ready for elections in 2026?
Well, I'm not sure if I mentioned making sure your voter registration is up to date yet or not.
Now, with voter registration, do people, how often do you need to update your voter registration?
Anytime you move, that's critical. And again, like I said, you can do it online now through the Secretary of State's. They have a site there. You can do it. Of course, you can do it at your local library. You can do it at our office. You can even download the form from our website at vote.greenecountymo.gov and be able to fill out there and mail it in. So there's a lot of ways that people can do that. But also, I think what's important is, right now, regardless of your party, people are already, announcing, I plan to run for X, Y, and Z seat in 2026. If you know your party affiliation or you know where you lean, you may not be affiliated with the party, but you may lean more towards one party or another, reach out to those parties and say, hey, I'm trying to learn more about the candidates that are running because I getting ready for the primary. This is important to me. And then a lot of times, organizations will give information on the issues as well. This is the time to be educated now in terms of making sure that you have all the information so that you are ready. And then, because one of the things we love as an election office is voters that go in and know how they're voting. Because I will tell you, not uncommon, you can tell people are trying to figure out, I don't know what this means when I vote this way on an issue. Because to be honest, and this is not anything I'm telling you, we don't write the issues that are on the ballots. Those are done by even in Greene County. Wording, if the commission puts something on the ballot, would be by the commission, not by our office. Statewide issues, it's by the legislature or the entity that puts on the ballot. And the reason I say all that is that, when you read an issue, make sure you understand if you say yes or no to that issue, what that yes or no means. And so, that's, I think, something that has frustrated voters for many years is I don't feel like I understand. And that's why you got to study beforehand so you do know.
Now, for procrastinators, is
Yes.
it okay to look it up while you're voting? Let's say you're reading an issue and you don't understand the language. Maybe you're intimidated. Is
Right.
that something
It's something where, I think a lot of people do that. We don't go around, and unless we see people trying to share information between voting booths, that's not allowed. You can't lean over and say, hey, this is, can you help me out on this issue? You have to be inside that. Other than if, for example, some people, for accessibility issues, they don't want to use the equipment. This happens on occasion. You can have somebody read the ballot to you, but they can never explain the ballot. And so, we will see people doing that. It's just, it's better to do it beforehand, just to be frank, than there at the location when you're there that day.
Absolutely. Just wanted to ask.
Yes.
It's something I've seen, so.
Absolutely, yeah.
And where's the best place to find the most accurate and current information about registration, polling places?
Well, I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if you go to vote.greenecountymo.gov, we've got our polling locations on there, as well as we have information about registering to vote on there as well. Gives you the option to do it online, and so that's an option a lot of people use. Now, one thing I'll tell you, if you don't register at our office or at the local library, they will, if you come to our office or a local library and we have a deputy registrar there, you'll present your ID. We get that registration. When we value that voter ID card and receive it, you're a registered voter. If you do it online, we will have to see your ID before you will get your voter ID card. So good thing is you can go to your polling location of the day of the election. We'll send you a card that says this is where you'll be voting. It's like a green card that's got green background and everything. Anyways, when you get that, go to that location. Make sure you got your photo ID with you, whether that's your Missouri State driver's license or like your passport photo. Those are two of the most common. Once you present that, then at that point you're allowed to vote, and they will mail you the voter ID card afterward. But you do have to show who you are before you're officially registered to vote.
Where are some good places for ballot information or for candidates or reliable information on certain issues for voting?
And that's one that we have to be careful as a county clerk, because that can become opinion-based. Now, one thing I will tell you is a lot of entities that, like a school or a city that has an issue on the ballot, they will have education about their issue, because they can educate, but they can't advocate. And as an office, we can't even educate. We can just say, here's the language, and at that point. But you can go, if you just want the facts, most entities are going to have something, and a lot of times they'll mail it to the voters now. They'll get that information in the mail, but they'll usually have a place where you can go and find that information online too. But there's a lot of organizations that do advocate, and of course you can search and be able to find that. I think, like a lot of us, one of the most challenging elections I have finding information out about, especially candidates, is in local elections, because a lot of candidates just don't put anything out there. And so I'm doing everything I can just personally to figure out, well, how do they think about these issues in terms of like school board, for example. That's important to me when I'm voting. So sometimes some of the races, it's almost like finding a needle in a haystack.
I did notice that on some of the ballots last year, or last time I voted, that there were just names and nothing else.
Right. And I always want those candidates to say, man, get out there and let people know who you are. That's important to the voters.
If you can't tell me now, how am I going to trust it later? It's my theory on that.
It's just, to me, it's of course, I've campaigned and ran for office and knocked doors, so it's common sense to me. But I know sometimes when people run for a local election, they don't think of it in that way. They're just like, I just want to serve on the school board. I don't want to be, quote, political. But they still need to know who you are, right. what your ideas and values are in terms of the seat you're asking people to vote you for. So.
Okay. Well, in summary here, is there one thing that you wish every voter understood about the elections?
The best thing about elections is we the people, because, I think about countries where you, quote, have an election, but really we already know the outcome ahead of time, because you have a dictator who's basically, we know that dictator is going to be, quote, reelected again. In our country, you are empowered to go be part of that election. You're empowered to be an election judge. You're empowered to come help us test before the election, after the election, making sure that the machines are accurately reading the ballots, that even after we test the machines, you can be part of the hand count to make sure that the hand count is matching what the machine tabulated. Those are all ways that we come together in order to have confidence in our elections. And so, that's what I want people to know about elections, is you can be a part of it. And the great thing is that, we have people in the disability community that serve as election judges here in Greene County, and they do a tremendous job. And so I really appreciate that, because I want everyone, who is willing and able to serve, come be a part of what we do. And you'll be able to see and have a lot more confidence in your elections when you participate. And that's what we invite. And that's why, and if you can't participate, come observe. You can come observe and watch the process. But it is about we the people. And I just want to remind people that they can be part of that process.
So how can someone get connected? Is there a good way to reach out to your office if someone is interested? You bet. Well,
we always recommend first going to, if you have a party preference, like Republican, Democrat, reach out to your party chair, because every other year they're supposed to give us a list of people that will serve. But we also have an application on our website at vote.greenecountymo.gov. You can go and fill that out, and so we can also accept applications that way. And so however you want to go through your party chair or come to our website, either way, you can make sure and get that information to come help be part of the process.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
You bet.
And I think that those are all the questions we had for you, and we really, really appreciate you coming on with us today, Shane. It's much appreciated, and we hope to continue the relationship we have with you in the Greene County Clerk's office.
No, you can always count on that, Afton. I think that you and Julie have been great. Just really enjoyed being part of this forum today, and look forward to maybe doing it again in the future.
Yeah. And for those who are interested, you can find out more voting information by reaching out to us as well. We try to provide as much education as we can, as far as what may be impacting you at the moment. And we did start a new email newsletter called Loop.
Okay.
So it stands for Legislative Organizing Opportunities Project. So we are looking for people to sign up more for that. So we'll share legislative information, things happening locally, federally, everything that may be impacting people with disabilities at the moment. So we hope to send more of those out. We sent our first one out this month.
Oh, awesome. I'll have to get signed up for that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we will call it a wrap. Thanks for listening. If you have any episode ideas or questions, feel free to email us at marketing@empowerabilities.org. You can feel free to listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit our website and get involved.